Okay, all right, well, let's get started. We'll call to order the meeting of the Zoning Bylaw Committee of April 19th. Alphabetical roll call, who's here? Tom Callahan here.
Jack Creighton here.
David Farag here.
We also have with us Judge Cutler and Cassandra Thayer, Assistant Town Planner. We don't seem to have anybody else out there. So the first order of business we'll get out of the way is the minutes of April. What was the meeting? April? No, what was the last minutes I just did?
I believe it was March 27th.
March 27th. So can I have a motion to approve those? Somebody? I'll move to approve them. Somebody second it, please.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Jack Creighton, aye.
Tom Callahan, aye.
David Farag, aye.
Okay. All right. The next item, this is our last meeting before town meeting. We will be posting a meeting for this committee as well as the planning board. I know the select board does that. So in case we have to deliberate or make any decisions on the floor, we can do that. In terms of the presentation, as I understand it now, I had requested and granted that we've been moved up in the warrant. We were originally 18 through 22 or 3, and then it was 19 because the zoning board slipped something in about a general bylaw that came up in our discussions. But I guess we've been moved up. I think it might be somewhere before Article 10, or at Article 10, but they're going in order of 1, 2, 3, 6, 8, 12. So we're going to be moved up. Hopefully that takes away the concerns of a quorum call. We will be after, I understand, the debate about the town hall, but before the community preservation articles, which involve funding for that. So hopefully that keeps everybody in the room, and we shouldn't have any worry about a quorum. Now, you saw my memo that my thoughts on this, and I'm opening this up to any suggestions, is that the original plan of having some kind of background thing like we did at the initial rollout, the history of zoning and the organization of the bylaw, blah, blah, blah. Not going to have time for that. It's going to be too busy of a town meeting. Just going to put that like it did for the rec fair in a handout. So, we are going to have a table out front like we did and hand some things out. I did that for the rec fair on front to back. So, it's 5 pages, 2-sided things. It's real short, but it'll give people a little orientation. And I thought the presentations themselves, unless there's an objection, would be similar to what we've done with the boards. Work off the summaries that Judge Cutler did. So those need to be up to date. I don't think we've made a lot of editorial changes to those during the course of going through all the boards. I don't think they needed a lot, but we want to make sure that that's ready to go, and that would be up on the screen. Also would be a handout at the rec fair. That too lent itself to like a 5-page front and back handout. The text of the articles will be in front of everybody as part of the motions, but I think, as we're just talking to this Cassandra, we obviously have to have them ready to go to throw up on the screen. But as we did with the boards, just really rely on the summaries as our presentation, and we can show them the text as we need to. I will try to be as short and sweet as I was with the boards, and the judge will stand ready to back me up with questions, comments, and everything. And then I guess in the usual course of things, Danny is part of Danny being our town moderator judge. He reads off the endorsements of all the boards usually. I truly hope that all the boards get up and say something, but I mean, I'm kind of up there, both planning board hat and.
Where do we stand with the votes by the boards at this point?
All right, so the votes were, for the planning board, everything was 6-0 except the height one. That was 5-1. The Advisory committee was 8-0 on everything. The select board was 5-0 on everything. The zoning board was either 6-0 or 5-0-1. I think there were two articles where they
Yeah,
had, I think Charlie abstained from some
yeah,
things.
yeah.
Woody did on the definition one, but so you know they're good, impressive numbers to see.
There's no one else that we're waiting for a vote at this point, is there?
No,
Okay.
everybody's all set, and we got it all into, so it'll be printed in the warrant, and
Okay.
so everybody will be able to see it. I do hope, Jack, that somebody from your board will get up for each one of these personally, and you know, I guess unless time is a real pressure where, you know, it's a unanimous vote, but it would be, I think, a good show if your board got up, especially for the height one.
Well, yes, I agree with you on that. We'll try to figure out how we want to manage that. I have a call into Danny Evans about how he wants to manage, because I told him that we need to manage the presentation on this.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, and like I said to you yesterday, I'd like to speak to him too.
Yeah.
Just particularly with dealing with non-voters speaking.
Okay.
But at
Why
this,
Perhaps how he's going to
Why
handle
don't
it.
you send me, why don't you send me an email memo?
Yeah.
On particular issues, and then I'll forward it and add a comment to it. That's a effective way, I think, to.
Okay, that's fine.
but I think your presentation is pretty well refined now, because I mean, from the public hearings that we've had and then going in front of the boards, the only thing I would say is just to make sure to just provide that little bit of background of introduction. If there are people there who hadn't seen anything, there's going to be a certain amount of people who haven't seen the public hearings or seen any of the board stuff. So they're coming and they're totally fresh of just like, you know, how was the board made? What have we been doing? Judge Cutler, you know, the background.
Yeah, I'll try to do that, but again, you know, I didn't want to, and that
It's
would have been brief to begin with, but I think we're going to be under some time pressures with the amount of items on the agenda. So
yes, of course, yeah.
I might refer to the handout that we did, and you know, I'm guessing, Cassandra, I'm thinking a minimum of 200 of these. It's a lot of paper, but I also think we can do some online publicity, you know, on 143 with some of these handouts as well. But does anybody else have, you know, any other? I mean, I think we refined it while we got to the last board. Does anybody else have any other thoughts about keeping it short and sweet, or Judge?
Well, it's not about keeping it short and sweet. It was just clarification of something. Is your typical custom to move to adopt the zoning bylaw amendments as printed in the warrant? Is that sort of your standard kind of motion?
Yeah.
Okay. Are there any now that you think were changed after they were printed?
No.
No. So we got everybody's.
Yeah, there are times when the motions they hand out that night when everybody checks in can sometimes be a little different than the warrant. The warrant gets sent out in the mail like probably next week or.
Right, but you're not having, what I'm asking is you're not preparing different motions.
No.
Okay.
No, the only thing we had to do was prepare the little short explanation blurb that goes into the warrant.
Okay.
So no, in our case, he'll just say, you know, Danny should just say moved as it's printed in the warrant, and with respect to the, oh, I'm sorry, Jack, go ahead.
Yeah, I think one of the things that select board can do effectively is to set the stage to wit. We've had all these public hearings. The select board has made sure that all things are covered repetitively in a series of public meetings. So there's nobody who can be blindsided, so to speak. And this is, Tom, something you and I should work on. But I think it would be a very effective and appropriate message from the select board. And you're basically saying, we've done our homework. don't worry about this because we've done your homework and we've made sure that people who are interested are fully vetted, have had a chance to speak, and et cetera, and so on. And that kind of kills two birds with one stone, I think.
Yeah, okay.
The only question I had was this: when it comes to the height, if there is any citizens or otherwise that bring up or are against it and bring up some kind of pictures or visuals or something like that, how is the debate going to flow on our end regarding the debate if there is one on height?
All right. Well, I would anticipate that Clark will do that. He's not here. He can tell us one way or the other. I would like to think he won't, but let's anticipate that he will, or somebody will. I'm sure he's talked to people, and other people will. It's hard to gauge because nobody shows up at our meetings, and at the forums, I didn't hear anybody express, other than a developer or Clark, express any kind of opposition, or would he? I have created a cheat sheet. Well, so the introduction thing to the forum, that would be just a handout at this point explaining background and who the committee is and history of zoning, blah, blah, blah. The only substantive discussion it had about the articles was about explaining the single lot exemption, which has turned out in the course of the board hearings and public forums to be like a non-controversial issue. I was thinking about adding something about height, but in fairness that we have one opposition, but it's at least a cheat sheet. But here's what I would like to see is I will do my thing with the summary. And, as lawyers, we're supposed to go up there as argument and anticipate the opposition. Better to come out of your mouth and deal with it, wait for the opposition to bring it up to the judge. Correct, Your Honor? That's sort of what we do. But Clark or whoever gets up, I would like to see somebody else from our committee, and Dave, you've been very articulate about the judge as well, but to the kind of responses the judges made at some of these board meetings, David, you've been very articulate about it. I don't want to be the only show up there arguing with him about this.
No, you won't be the only one. If there's a debate on it, I'll certainly be involved with it. The only thing, like I said, is just anticipate is if we have some kind of visual and it shows, a flat roof, ugly house and saying this is going to come to every block next to you due to the height thing. I think we need some kind of rebuttal with it. Whether it's an overlay that we could just show, showing what Situate and Hingham do. They have two different ways of doing it. But like I said before, I haven't seen anybody ever complain that the house in Cohasset are too small in height. It's been the exact opposite. It's been that they're too tall because of the loopholes. So.
Right. And then, we have to be honest with people, and this data sitting in a spreadsheet in my office that the working group did, that in reviewing large home applications for the last few years, we don't have a super problem with houses being 40 feet tall, but the trend is going in that direction. And certainly in places like the Village, the trend is going in that direction. And, if people say, what is the problem you're trying to solve? It's more that we're trying to be proactive than solving an actual problem yet. But I guess, so I came up with these little things, a cheat sheet for myself. But
the only thing I would add to this, I think someone brought it up at one of the meetings and I thought it was a very good point. Even if you have an attic, there's nothing to stop you from putting in dormers. So you still have possibly a fourth floor usable space.
Yeah. Well, the point is the opposition and that's come out of other people's mouths is going to be limited to 2.5 stories. And so
you can have at least 3 stories.
Yeah, this is my point. My point down here, this second bullet point is that, I'm looking here in my house, and yes, it's 1970. It's not today's design, but it's not 8 feet. Maybe it's 8 feet, but it's not 10 feet. But if you're generous in 10 feet, it's 3 stories in an attic. The argument just makes no sense to me. And then my next to last bullet point is the flat roof argument, I think, is also nonsense. But you know, I think to emphasize that, you know, the common sense, the loophole, and I don't know if it exactly applies, but there is a principle that all properties in a zoning district are supposed to be treated the same way. Well, why are peak roof buildings treated differently than everybody else? You know?
Well, I think one thing to remember is that the issue really comes is when you have an uneven piece of land. So when you look at pieces of land that are absolutely flat, go look around town and see how many flat roofs you have. You don't see any, you know what I mean? So it is the ultimate red herring, because most of the houses have pitched roofs if they're colonials or whatever, and they're in all sorts of town. So the real issue we're trying to solve here is when you have the different measurements. We're going to do the different points on the bottom, but you need the top as well, because if you allow the fuzziness at the top, then what's the sense of measuring the bottom if you can, without the top on the
right.
on the. But yeah, I think if you look at like I said, if you look at the place in town where it's absolutely even and flat, you do not see flat roofs, and they can only go up 35 feet. So there's the answer.
And one of Woody's things, I was surprised that Woody focused on garages rather than houses, and he likes this definition for a house, but not for a garage. And detached garages right now are not supposed to be having apartments under our zoning. And it's, the very simple answer is, if we do decide to go in that direction, and we are thinking about that will change the height from 15 feet to 20 feet or 25 feet. We'll just deal with that. And I want to try to continue to emphasize the difference in the definition and the number. But I'll share this with you, Dave, because again, you've been really articulate on this point, and I want you to jump up. I do not want to be getting the lead, because I know I'll get frustrated. And if I get frustrated, something will slip out of my mouth that I don't want slipping out. So.
Yeah, I would suggest that we simply answer it as you just did. If in the future it is decided that there are some things that we need to change, we can always change that.
Right.
What we're trying to do now is set a unified, understandable standard that applies. So if you're doing something with your property, you know what you can do, and you know what your neighbor can do and what they can't do. End of story.
Yeah, and to go on. Oh, go ahead. Sorry, Judge Cutler. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think the other important point to this is the definition, and we're talking about measuring to the top of the roof. And yes, for practical purposes, if you look at the current height restrictions, we are measuring to 35 feet. But as you said, Tom, that can change in the future. This bylaw language does not say anything about 35 feet or any other height. It simply talks about how the height is measured. So
excellent.
We're not reducing the height
of
anything.
Yeah, that's a good point to make. So
yeah, the other thing, as Jack said, this is a certifiable objective standard. Mm-hmm. And what we have now is a very subjective standard. And as we all know, lawyers live with all the exceptions, but unfortunately we've allowed the engineers and architects to do the same thing, and that's a step too far, as we've seen. So,
and if people bring up what's gone on in the village recently, I'm very familiar with what the height is on 1 Pleasant Street, and to the extent that 55 South Main, which we gave them their permit last week, that's at the limit. I thought it exceeded 40 feet. The board didn't agree with me, but that has a very unique problem that can explain that one, and it's probably the only building in town that's going to have that problem. And to the extent the Affordable Housing Committee gets up, nobody's saying we can't do 5 stories, 4 stories, 5 stories, 6 stories out on 3A when we do multifamily housing.
Yeah.
The definition is going to be the same that applies to those buildings as to any other building. So yeah, I'm just saying everybody be prepared to be a team effort on that one.
Yes, absolutely.
So, you know, I think
Are
that'll
you
be a,
prepared to have an alternative amended motion if you think it's going to go down?
yeah, it would just be one word change, a couple of word changes. I guess we can have it ready, but I don't know.
I don't think it is. I think,
Yeah, two-thirds is hard to gauge, and it, you know, the problem is that, like we did with the street definition a couple of town meetings ago, is that a lot of people in the room are not attuned to this stuff. They don't know anything about it. They're not trying to educate themselves before town meeting, and you know, who knows what emotional argument will sway them.
Well, that's what I'm saying. If you see that the tide is changing at some point and you're concerned that you won't get the 2/3, are you prepared at this time to go back to measuring peaked roofs to the 5 feet above the roof line? Do you want to have that in your back pocket just in case?
Yeah, we can have the text ready to go if we need to do it. And like I said, we're all scheduling these meetings for the boards for official meetings, so they can do a quick vote. I hope it doesn't come to that.
You're not expecting any floor amendments, are you?
Hard to know. I mean, you know, the amendment that you're talking about is something that Clark may get up and propose.
Because I would rather have us have the language ready rather than have somebody come up with it on the fly, or even.
Yeah, all right, well, that's fine. We'll have it ready. I mean, I think it's just bringing back the language from the existing definition. It's probably not difficult to do, but I hope it doesn't get to that point.
Well, I can jot something up and send it to you.
Yeah, and I think what we would do is, you know, print it with red type, or where you're bringing in the change, bringing back the old definition essentially, so that if we throw it up on the screen, people can see it clearly and, you know, see that.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't just bring back the old definition, but I think there's some tweaking.
Something like that. All right, well then
measurement is the same.
You volunteered, so
yeah, I will do that. Yes.
If it does come out, I think the way we would handle that is we would say, well, okay, we understand that we do have Judge Cutler from Town Council's office here, and we'd ask her to see if that's something that she can quickly put some language on. And that way we talk about Town Council, we talk about Judge Cutler, and so whatever is proposed, you know, we have it basically not verified, but identified as definitive and authoritative.
I mean, the other thing we did with the street thing, when it looked like it was failing, is we changed it to a motion to indefinitely postpone it, so that we didn't have an alternative, and there wasn't, you know, we didn't have.
Yeah, I wouldn't definitely postpone it as a negative vote, which means you can't bring it back for 2 years. You know, so I would not indefinitely postpone it. I would not move in that direction. So that if you think it's going to be defeated, rather than move to indefinitely postpone it, I think you might try an amended motion and see if that will fly.
Yeah. Well, we'll have to just gauge the room. I mean, it's increasingly difficult to go every year, but you know, the town has changed. There's a lot of turnover. It's hard to read people who I don't know, you know. Right. I can expect the usual suspects for opposition.
I think, you know, I think it's right to always have an alternative in the back pocket, but I think we got to be really strong in this, because people look at it and they say, if you get squishy on it, if you don't believe in it, why should I? You know, and I think that's just a very simple fact. So I've got no qualms about going full steam ahead on this one, because if we don't get the height definition properly done, then when we look to the fall to do anything else, what do you think that's going to be like? So I think this is the canary in the coal mine to see where everything's at.
Yeah.
I agree.
And yeah, and Judge, you've been really good on this and speaking to the boards on it. So I hope you'll certainly weigh in on this one, because I think the town's going to give you a lot of deference on your opinion. So.
And I just with one more alternative, and that is you can refer it back to the committee and have the motion to refer the definition back to the committee for further consideration. And that's not a negative motion.
And that preserves the rest of everything. So we could vote on everything else except for that and refer that back to the committee.
We could craft the motion so it adopts everything else except refers the definition.
Okay.
Yeah.
Excellent. That's our strategy. If it gets rocky, I don't think we're gonna, if it starts getting rocky and we have to really fight for it, that's problematic when you need 2/3. So we can just put that back and go back to just passing the rest of it.
Yeah, I also want us to be cautious that we're going to hear from the usual suspects, and don't think that they have all kinds of sway in town just because they're the loudest voices in the room.
Yeah.
You know, I'm not convinced we would have lost a year and a half ago or 2 years ago, whenever it was, but it's kind of trying to read, you know, like at that town meeting, people who you don't know or normally don't participate, normally don't get up to speak, but you know, there are people who are, you know, some people's wives of developers who get up and don't disclose that, and you know, we know who they are. And I wouldn't get too scared about the usual suspects.
Well, I'm not going to suggest it. I'm just saying we ought to have it there.
No.
Just
No, all right. No, I know. But I guess I'm agreeing with Dave that this is something we should, you know, if we can't prevail.
No, you want to come out strong. This is what you believe in. This is what you think is the right way to go. Done your homework, and you heard from people at the public hearings and with various boards, and you listened to what was said, and this is the product, and you just move it with confidence.
And this is the consensus of the town.
Yeah.
This is everybody in the town has had an opportunity and has spoken, and the committee was not come with they're not predisposed to any conclusion. They listen to this as truly a community effort and a community result.
Yeah.
There's your speech, Jack. Thank you.
That's right.
You'll get up there. No, you're good at saying that kind of stuff. The community's kumbaya, and I think
I don't know how to take that, but I'll take it and thank you for the compliment.
It's a compliment. It's a compliment, and again, like I said, I certainly want the judge's voice, but I don't want to be the only voice on this one. So.
Well, I can't promote anything on your behalf, but I can certainly give you supportive, you know, legal advice, but I can't really.
Yeah, no, I hear you. You can answer maybe some questions.
Yeah.
All right. Anything else about town meeting?
No.
We should be early enough that we're probably done on Monday, but if something weird happens and a quorum doesn't show up, it gets moved to Tuesday until they decide, the powers that be decide what to do after that. So.
I think we're
in good shape. Yeah. You guys got bigger fish to fry than we do. So that's nice. That's nice that there's something else. No, it really is nice that there's something else controversial. And I hope in the fall you come up with a real doozy to give us cover for that one.
Well, trust me, after the town hall debate, there'll be no oxygen left in the room.
All right. So with that, let's talk about the fall. I don't know how much you've gotten to read my little magnum opus here. It is very ambitious, yes, but that's what is always going to be. We're trying to do this in 2 town meetings, and it being very hard to do it in too many pieces. The judge and I spoke about this today as well, with her thoughts about how to organize this. Just up at the top, I'm really pushing to get to a 7-member committee so that we have more workload sharing. I don't mind doing this, and I've done a lot of it over the last 2 years, and there's a zillion things on my computer, but I can't do everything. And there's some, when we get into the meat of some of these initiatives, I just can't get into reading every model bylaw or exploring the bylaws of 5 different towns. And I'm really going to ask people, you know, as I did throughout this memo, take the lead on some of these initiatives on particular articles. I have asked ZBA a number of times over the year and 2 other individuals to see if they're interested in joining us. I'll know more about that after the election. I really hope ZBA would send a representative, but if they do not, one of the things that I think we learned in this process is that planning and ZBA need to be brought into this process a hell of a lot sooner.
Yeah.
And I did want to circulate this. The judge and I talked about that. We discussed that, for example, on Article 3 about districts and where to put this multifamily housing. We need to deal with that fairly quickly with other boards. We need to get input from the select board, from planning, an alternative housing committee on the housing part of it. And I agree with that. I kind of played around with a memo that I got to still refine, but you know, in May, we need to convene everybody in May to get going on that. You know, what direction are we going to go in? You saw my stuff about housing choice. You know, I've explored the properties along 3A in the commercial district that might meet the criteria. I can tell you that one property owner has already talked to me as planning board chair about doing a development, 60 units. Property has a frontage problem, but it would be in proximity to the North Situate station. I've received an inquiry, but have yet to speak to anybody about some developer who's thinking about looking at Cushing Plaza, where CVS and Victoria's Pizza, again, south end of town, within proximity. You know, I don't know what their idea is, but there are development pressures. There are people coming out of the woodwork, and some of them, I'm sure, are aware that we have to comply with this housing choice. If they've looked it up, we have to zone for 638 units, 43 acres of property. So, you know, the pressures will be brought to bear on us, even though our current zoning doesn't allow a lot of this to happen, but there are people ready and waiting to jump on this stuff. And so we need to early get these other boards involved in where they would like to see this develop. We can't avoid it. We have to zone for it. So, Jack.
Yeah, on that thing, one of the hot topics, if you will, is the conversion of retail and office to multifamily within the overall commercial real estate, CRE, commercial real estate industry. So Cushing Plaza is type of things that they like. I know this was done extensively in California, exactly those plazas, and suddenly, because housing is the highest and most predictably profitable use for many things. So we're at the right time for that, and giving a developer a guideline. I think that's probably a pretty good way to solve that issue.
Yeah. Well, like I said, what the judge and I talked about today, though, is getting certainly planning, your board,
yep,
probably affordable housing together soon, very, very soon, May, right after the election with the new boards. And let's brainstorm on where we want to do this. You know, is there any sentiment to allow multifamily housing in residential districts? I did get an inquiry from another developer about extending the Harbor Overlay District to a particular property. I won't name it, I'll let you guess. I cautioned them that we're in the middle of this process. I cautioned them that they can't do that with the current zoning of that property. And I cautioned them to read Cohasset 143 and gauge the sentiment of the community about the current project that's in the overlay district.
We're talking about the overlay that allows the condos, right?
Yeah, it allows mixed use in the harbor for the,
Right.
the first time we've had residential use. So there's an inquiry there. And so, the pressures from the outside are there. There's people ready to jump on things, and we as a community need to decide early on. The working group and the bylaw committee have discussed changing zoning and consolidating the districts in the harbor for 2.5 years now. All right, we either do it or we don't. I think it's a no-brainer that we do it, but then the uses, we need to decide, are we going to allow more residential and mixed use in the harbor, or are we going to keep it commercial? And the one project is done.
Well,
again, there's people knocking on our door asking us to make that very decision. And I don't want a developer coming to town meeting with an initiative, a bylaw change that's developer written. I want us to be in control of this process.
Just so we don't spend a lot of time on a dead end. I don't think there's any sentiment to allow ever again what's going on there in the harbor right now. The overwhelming thing that I hear is highly negative, and I don't solicit it at all. This is what I hear, and I don't believe that the select board and certainly whoever is on the new select board is going to have any great change on that. I think where we want to be looking at is where it fits into Cohasset, which is, I like that Cushing Road, Cushing Plaza, excuse me. And there are other places in town. And I do think we ought to figure out what the guidelines are going to be. But I don't think we're doing a developer any favor by saying, well, we might be looking at changing the harbor zoning. It's a sore spot right now.
Right. No. And by the way, nobody's talked about putting that property or any other property not currently in the waterfront business district into a new harbor district. It's never been talked about. It's again, I'm just saying that the pressure is out there, and there's
I know.
Yeah. Around,
one thing in the documents that you had that I don't think I saw was that needs to be in there is regarding the mitigation fees, and how they would be computed and where they would go. Now, before she left, Lauren had sent over a package of a gridded chart of what other towns do and how they calculate them. And then we, on other meetings, we can get into that and send that around or whatever. But I think that's something that's really important, because right now the town created or reinvigorated the sidewalk committee. And as they looked for sidewalks all around town, I think one of the things they're going to find is that it cost $1 million per mile for an installed sidewalk ADA compliant. So you can take out the tape measure and say how much is that going to, how far is it going to get us? So I think with the mitigation fees, that could go a long way to some of these things within the areas that they're doing. Now developers should be doing as their own mitigation. If they have to provide a simple sidewalk on a particular side, they should be installing it themselves. But the mitigation fees based upon parking and things could be put into a pot that could be used within that neighborhood, so it wouldn't run afoul of a linkage fee, test or anything like that.
Right.
But I do think we're going to need that we're going to have to look at that.
My bad that I didn't remember to.
Yep. That's a talk for another time, but I just wanted to add it to the list.
No, it's good because, a lot of this still is ideas that have been going around my computer in my head from 2 years ago.
That's fine.
Refreshed and renewed. But Judge Cutler, maybe good time for you to talk about what you and I talked about, of where our work priority needs to start in May, in May and June to get going on this.
Yeah, well, as Tom mentioned, I think it's particularly important that the policy issue of where and how much multifamily housing is going to be on our agenda here and how we're going to do this. It's important that we get that done really before the summer starts. So at least we have a background to work from. I don't know, Cassandra, if everybody has seen the town's plan. housing choice plan. Didn't you have to submit one to the
We
state?
have a housing production plan.
Yeah, and you have it approved. I think
Yes.
We have a housing production plan and we did a preliminary for the housing choice. I think
Yeah.
the more important document to see though is the one Lauren sent me right around the time we went to that seminar a couple of weeks ago out in Worcester, which is the chart that the state has for each town of how many units they have to do, how many acres they need to zone.
Right, but I don't know if you had a plan about any of this beforehand, if anything had been developed. No.
I think, our housing production plan, the preliminary thing that got filed for housing choice, my understanding of it, it's very cursory and doesn't get into details.
Okay.
And the
Yeah.
housing production plan was written a couple of years ago before this was even thought of and on the horizon.
Right.
That's
But
why
you want to
affordable
coordinate.
housing and the affordable housing trust need to get brought into this.
Absolutely, absolutely. But I think if you could hash that out this spring, that would give us a major leg up.
Yeah,
In the
and-
meantime, what I have been working on, or started to work on, is the use regulations section. And this is going to be a tremendous job, because not only are we revising the use regulations in the table and getting it in proper order, and all the things that were mentioned for all the other articles that we're working on, but there are other articles, other zoning articles, I think this performance standards for business district uses. There
15,
is
15, 18, and 22.
Yeah. I mean,
22 is
there are at
22
least
is the
3
hard one.
other articles that have really deal with use, and we want to somehow combine them and get them all in order. So we'll be taking care of amending really 3 large zoning articles of the bylaw in one piece. The second thing is that everything.
And I've suggested that. My draft is a suggestion of that. And again, I want to just emphasize, it is just a suggestion. I want other people to chime in on this stuff.
Right. Well, I am going
I believe in starting with some discussion points. So somebody has, this is my attitude with the working group. Somebody has to write something.
Right. So I'm setting out a broad outline of how it would be set up with some samples of groupings of uses, taking the uses that are in your current use table and grouping them as far as I can into more general categories with examples, rather than the individual specific uses. Rather than saying flower shop, that would be grouped in under retail stores.
Right. And that's the approach we took. The working group, I'll tell you, took that approach from the beginning. And because when Woody was a member of that, we have a famous case on 3A that there is a animal hospital, Crazy Paws, across from Stop and Shop, and they had to go to the land court because our bylaw had such specificity on uses related to dogs that their use wasn't allowed, but something like a kennel would have been, but a vet wasn't. And it was bizarre. The woman had to go through the land court to get permit to build. And it was
right. So what I was going to do is prepare sort of these groupings showing what uses that you now have would fall under each category. Yeah. And then I think you really have to parse through it to figure out, well, are some of these uses things we don't want? Are there uses that we're missing that we want to group into these categories and make them examples? And then once we've got that settled, going back and seeing what's allowed in each district and making sure we have it all. It's going to be a complex situation.
Yeah.
And then
that's going to beget a bunch of definition changes.
Yes.
Because we have to define all those uses in broad categories.
Right.
I was trying to be careful when I did that to not allow anything we already prohibit, like fast food and stuff.
Right. But we also have to address the items that I mentioned in the diagnostic that need to be expressly exempted from regulation. And so I've got those categories as well. Yeah. So I think that will take us, I'm hoping to get you that before by the middle of May at the latest, so that we can really get down to brass tacks and start drafting the actual Article 4 revision
Yeah.
by June, so we can
Right.
get it and start
Get it
considering
out of the way. Yeah.
right, get it out of the way. And then I think the other thing that has to go along with that are the dimensional changes and the regulations and the parking and access regulations. I mean, I think they all kind of go together. And then solar energy is just, that'll be part of Article 4 because we have to allow it in some places, and we're going to have to decide that. If you're going to leave most solar energy only within an overlay district, that's a much bigger, broader issue. I think it's better to treat it as a special permit use and decide where it can go.
Yeah, and that's the approach I took as well. If you saw, get rid of the overlay district and bring it into Article 4 in some way.
Right.
And for just so everybody else knows, I asked the Alternative Energy Committee, who originally wrote the wind and solar articles, has been given the judge's diagnostic points. They've been given my ideas on those two, and I've asked them if they have any suggestions to come up with them by June, so we can get that one out of the way. I think the articles themselves are pretty easily put out of the way. I'm pretty well convinced after meeting with the chair of CONCOM, the CONCOM agent, and the new resiliency person that anything on new climate initiatives is going to be in the spring. I do not think that any of the, first of all, there should be coordination what the CONCOM does with their bylaw, what might be done in general bylaws, and what we do in the zoning bylaw. I just don't get the sense that it will anywhere be near ready for the fall. But again, there's an example of where I'd like somebody else in the committee to take point on that, working with CONCOM and the agent and the resiliency coordinator, because again, it's just too much on my plate right now. I'm trying to focus with the judge on the real core stuff. So anybody who is interested in that, I appreciate, but we can decide that after we hopefully get some new members on.
Have you heard anything from the Affordable Housing Committee at all regarding anything?
Well, somebody from the committee threw in a comment about the height thing. So I know that they're concerned about, 35 feet, about where it's measured to. So, and I don't have a problem. My proposal is that we let 5 stories go in this housing choice overlay district. I'm okay with 5 stories. Steve Garmer, is the chair of the Affordable Housing Trust, reached out to me, and I sent him something the other day, but he's interested in stuff too. So I want to include them in the conversation. In the past, in the working group, I know we reached out to them about their thoughts on accessory dwelling units, and they were singularly uninterested in the topic.
Well, those have to be dealt with in Article 4. So
yeah, and I don't think that they are looking at accessory dwelling units as being a giant part of the housing production plan. So I think, I certainly will include them in the future discussion about it when we come up with some ideas. I'd like to, Woody had a lot to say about it. I'd love to see him take some lead on this.
Well, the real roadblock in that is at the state level, which says that you can't count that accessory dwelling as an affordable unit unless you deed it, and that just kills it. Because nobody is going to deed their property permanently. They would love to have an accessory dwelling at a very attractive rent. That wouldn't be an issue. But once you say you got to make it permanent,
right? So that's a policy issue for the town, where that bylaw has been woefully underutilized in the 15 years it's existed. And do we continue with it? The forum we had in December and November, those were the choices. Do we continue it? Do we tweak it a little bit, or do we expand it to outbuildings like garages and stuff? And that's another policy decision. But it's affordable housing didn't seem to have any interest in it ever on it, so that's fine.
well,
yeah, I mean, they should, because any contribution to lower cost housing opportunities makes other affordable units available for people. So even if they're not deed restricted and counted, it still contributes to affordable housing.
Yeah, I think accessories are still, you know, a noble thing to look at, but I think you're right. That just doesn't, you know, for the count for what affordable housing committee might be looking at, it might not be within their purview because it's not going to count. So,
Right.
One other thing related to accessory dwelling units, and it's become a big thing, particularly with coastal communities, is this idea of short-term rental, the VRBO situation. And if you don't regulate it, it can get pretty sticky. And before you know it, you have people renting out their houses on a weekend basis all year long to a bunch of people. So it may be something you want to deal with as an accessory type use, and then you have to decide whether it's something that is better.
My set of definitions, I think, might have dealt with transient uses. I put it under that category.
Yeah.
And then at the last minute, after the planning board meeting last week, one of our conditions to 55 South Main Street was no short-term rentals. And we had done that for the harbor project as well. And it got into a debate on the planning board because it was like any rental for under 6 months. And, you know, people trying to split hairs about the Airbnb and commercial type short-term rentals versus, well, you know, what if you have a family member who wants to come down? What do you want to do, a summer rental or a winter rental while you go to Florida? So it at least generated what in the things I added to this memo, a survey monkey poll on that. We'll get to those in a minute, but I was somewhat surprised at some of the opinions I heard on the planning board last Wednesday, that there seemed to be some sentiment that they're okay, or that we have to split.
It's going on. You may not be aware of it because for years and years and years, people went to Florida and rented out their place for a time, or, you know, rented it out for the summer to people that they knew. And it was just kind of, you know, it's just what people do and it's customary. What happens though is when you get an outside commercial business that buys up residential properties and no one lives there permanently, they're just rented out on a weekly basis or a weekend basis. That's the issue that you want to look at and protect against. Probably not what people do normally or what you're used to seeing, but this new business is relatively recent, and something that we probably want to make sure that there's some protections there from that kind of
and again, and my drafts hadn't dealt with it as fully as I think it needs to be, you know, where it came up in a permitting decision. So the other thing that, I mean, before I just go back to Dave's point about mitigation, where would we throw impact and mitigation fees into Article 4?
No, that's
somewhere else, somewhere.
Right. Yeah, you have to figure out when that's appropriate, and it could be if there's a special provision for a particular use that will have an impact. You know, that's something we have to think of how that can operate. It might have to be a separate bylaw.
I'm sorry, Jen.
Could I interject just a couple of things from the overall town's perspective? I couldn't agree more strongly with Judge Cutler's thing about the VVRF, that we had better get in front of that before we're playing chase up and people say, well, I'm already doing it, because we are very, very vulnerable to that. And it starts simply as somebody say, hey, I'm going to be away for a couple of weeks. Oh, geez, I can get a couple of $1,000 or $10,000. And then people start doing it. Or what happens is it's so well organized that you sign up, it's painless, and somebody else takes care of it, and the money's pretty good. So we need to regulate that. And mitigation, I think we really need to have a strong and clear mitigation policy. I was quite frankly, surprised that we didn't, because I was so accustomed to, when I was doing stuff in Boston, that there was always very strong and very aggressive mitigation. And if you didn't meet mitigation, you didn't put a shovel on the ground at all. And you couldn't get away with saying, you know, I'm gonna put a basketball court on the other side of town. It had to be meaningful. So, Judge, if you had some model things, that would be very helpful. And Tom, on the.
I mean, for decades, it's not been typical to find those things in small suburban towns. It's a really an urban phenomenon.
They link them to parking a lot if you have a commercial project. That's where they calculate them. But but we can send around the chart that Lauren had sent it around before she had left, and we can use that as a starting point. And then if Judge Cutler has any ideas of some things, but I mean, you look at towns like Dedham or other places like that, you know, they've got them baked in there. And you know, if you have a commercial project, you know, you're not even bringing it to the board without having a mitigation package of what you're doing. You know, in the commercial sense, if it's on a highway district, you're going to be looking at lights, curb cuts, things like that. But but depending upon what it is, it could be more. But yeah, I've had the same experience, Jack, that it wasn't even handed into the planning board without a package there.
Oh yeah.
So, and that was the expectation too. So it's not, you know, so
and now before the Menino administration had friendly talks.
Are we able to do any kind of linkage related to schools? Because as our population is growing, we are going to have pressure on schools. We are trying to continue to maintain a K through 12 district in a small town.
You're not going to tie linkage to a commercial use to say that they need to support the schools.
No, but
no. The only thing that you would have is if a project was so big in some way, shape, or form. If you had an impact study on it, and then that would show what the impact is, and then that gets into not being a detriment to the community and that kind of thing. So that's what I've seen, but not any no blank checks to the schools for mitigation.
That's the impact on schools, and the costs of educating more kids is the biggest impact we face from residential development. It isn't whether there's a sidewalk in front of the house, frankly. But and I didn't think there was a way we could effectively deal with it. But Cassandra, can you find what Lauren had on that subject and see that it gets circulated around?
Yeah, I'm sure it's somewhere in my email. I'll have to dig around.
Yeah,
I'll see if I can find it too, because I had it when it was a few months before she left, but I'll see if I can find it too.
The emails are getting thick to search through.
Yes.
So, let's talk about the meeting schedule then. Wednesdays in May are a problem because there are 2 planning board meetings. One Wednesday can't be used because there's no staff to run the Zoom. So Cassandra and I had a preliminary discussion about 2 Mondays in May. I believe we talked about the 8th and the 29th.
22nd.
22nd, I'm sorry, the 8th and the 22nd. Tentatively, is that good for everybody?
I don't know about Monday the 8th, but as I say, if you all are beginning to work on this other issue.
Same here. I don't know if I'll be able to make the 8th. The second one I would be able to, but the 8th would be out.
Let's at least shoot for,
but I'll double check.
Let's shoot for the meeting on the 22nd is to really get into discussing Article 4. You'll have my suggestions, you'll have the judge's suggestions, I would assume by then, perhaps.
Okay.
Oh yeah.
And so let's set aside the 22nd as a meaty discussion on Article 4. As far as Article 3 in the districts and placing multifamily housing, I've drafted a memo to the other boards, and I just, again, if it's going to be logistics, do I go to individual board meetings? Can we get us all together? Can maybe on the meeting for the 9th of this committee, do we invite the other boards to come to it and we can discuss that? I
think it would be okay to have a joint board meeting on a couple of these, because
it's just finding a night.
Yeah, but I think with whether it's the Alternative Energy Committee or the Affordable Housing one, it would be helpful, I think, for our board to get up to speed with a little bit of what they were doing, get a little background of what their parameters are, and then see how it fits, with us. Because I mean, I'm not familiar. I can watch the stuff on the YouTube, but I mean, I'm not as familiar with what the affordable housing one's been doing. I know there's a lot of stuff in the background going on with them, but
Yeah, the only thing they got that's active is, I guess it's going to be a town meeting, is Habitat is building something up where the antique store burned down in West Corner.
yeah.
I think what I'll do is ask the chair to maybe just give us the quick executive summary, and there probably is an executive summary to the housing production plan, but an executive summary of it as it exists in 2023. It's now, that plan is 4 or 5 years old at this point. I don't, my own gut is that the sentiment of the community as a whole, if asked, is, that all of this is to be developed on 3A. I don't think people are going to suddenly want to see apartment buildings in the residential districts. I don't think anybody's going to want to see apartment buildings at the harbor, and the village is what it is. It's not going to be a place of large scale residential development.
The village is almost done at this point as far as what you can do there. There's not too many properties that are left that you can squeeze in.
We got another infill project where there's like empty lot between the South Main Street building and the Fix-It shop that faces the parking lot. But it's small, so we're only going to get, it's going to develop 2 new apartments because it's a small area. There really isn't much left. But, so I'll try to coordinate a time to, with these other boards. Jack, we were just talking about this meeting about districts and citing the housing choice district,
right?
Where we're going to do that. I will tell you that thing with Cushing Plaza, I don't know what they have up their sleeve. I know the lawyers, so I have a call into them to try to at least get some sense of what they want to do. I don't understand that we have to have every part of the zoning district within a half mile of a station, but the majority of it has to be. And that's the other thing that came out too, that I mentioned in this memo. And it literally came out like a week ago that Lauren got to me. So DHCD is now taking the next step. They've made the chart of what all the towns need to do. And now they've come out with thoughts about a model bylaw. And what I drafted as the supplement to the actual dimensions in the table was before that. And I haven't read it in excruciating detail. And I would love, again, there's another one where I'd love some help on, and I can, but now DHCD is giving some guidance on a bylaw. We have to allow everybody right. We can't mandate mixed use, but we can encourage mixed use. So, particularly if we, the tax issue, I was saying to the judge today, I think a multifamily development on 3A is still going to generate a lot of taxes, but we also are losing a commercial tax base. So we want to encourage, I think, mixed use on all of these developments as much as we can. And the question is, do we incentivize that with maybe a density bonus or something? Now, the density is already going to be great. It's supposed to be 15 units an acre.
I think
I mean, those are thoughts that we had to have, but this is where we need to have the joint meeting of these boards to get their thoughts about, as a policy, what direction are we going to go to in writing this zoning district up. So I'm going to reach out to you, Jack, and the other boards, and we'll figure out, we somehow do a joint meeting, or one of us holds a meeting and invites the others to come. We'll figure that out. It's going to be a logistical nightmare of getting.
Practically speaking, nothing's going to happen between now and town meeting and the election.
No, it'll be after the election.
Right.
We're looking.
Keep in mind.
You stepped out for a moment. You stepped out for a moment, but we're looking at meetings for this committee for Monday the 9th, the 8th, and Monday the 22nd. Now, the 22nd, we're going to set aside to have our meaty discussion about Article 4. So Monday the 8th, where we're the host of the meeting and we invite everybody else, might be the way to go. And it'll be 2 days after the election. Or we have to find one of your meetings, one of Affordable Housing's meetings, or some other day that all of us can meet together. And that's going to be difficult to do. And it's difficult then to find staff because we run the Zoom. But,
well, Monday the 8th, I'm out of town.
All right. Well, we'll figure
also, keep in mind that I manage most of those committees and trusts. So you really just have me.
We've got the in.
You've got the staff. It's me.
In the memo that I drafted to them, I really like realizing there's time pressures and this is coming up at the last minute. said, let's find time to get together no later than June 10th. But I think the judge is correct. We need to jump right into this. I mean, text, we have an early December town meeting. It's like this schedule. Text needs to be pretty much ready by the end of September. Then we got to do our planning board hearings and our other board hearings. Again, I think roll it out to the public well in advance of town meeting. And then
you should also be aware that the select board is planning a funding only meeting for long-term capital funding, and that will be very early in September. Separate town meeting only for that, and we'll be looking at a variety of these major capital funding things that have been kind of kicked down or not fully embraced over the year, and it's going to be a very interesting, summer.
And we wouldn't be ready for that.
No, there'll be nothing in zoning on that. This is
we wouldn't be ready anyway. But
we're trying to do is take that heavy stuff off of the fall town meeting and put it so we will have time in the town meeting.
I don't disagree. So.
All right.
So anyway, I guess where do we leave it for tonight? I hope you're reading all this stuff that I did. Again, just ideas. I'm not married to them, but we got to start somewhere. The judge will, again, and my things didn't incorporate all the diagnostic recommendations yet either, so there's still some work to do. But if anybody, when they go through this memo on things where I'm looking for somebody to take point on a particular issue, wants to volunteer, please do. If you have thoughts on some of these issues other than what I write and the judge writes, please do. Although, the judge and I discussed it, it might be a little unwieldy if we have 5 versions of bylaws, but I'm not expecting everybody to write a bylaw. But ideas, thoughts about it. 22nd, we will get into the weeds on Article 4. And that is going to set the stage for a lot of other changes. It generates changes to a number of other articles, including the definitions. So we'll get a lot. Yeah.
I just want to say, I won't have a draft revision of Article 4 for the 22nd. No. I will have sent you the broad outline of uses, the topics to be discussed, right, to incorporate into the draft so that I can get.
Right. Okay. And again, I'm not wedded to what I wrote, but I had gone a step beyond that to actually show you what it would look like. And yeah, we'll have plenty to discuss and we'll be able to make a lot of substantive decisions. Hopefully, before we meet by the time of the 22nd, I would really, really like to find 2 more recruits. So I'm going to work on the zoning board some more. And then I have reached out to 2 other individuals and we'll see what they want to do. But we really need 7 people. There's going to be a lot of work to do, a lot of things to read, review, and splitting up the work is going to be critical to it.
It's a good idea to run those names by me before you get too seriously.
Well, I'll tell you right now, it's your two soon-to-be former colleagues.
Okay.
One has gotten back to me to express interest. The other one hasn't yet. And the zoning board's objections, I understand, but the more I think about the zoning board is if they're not comfortable being on the committee for whatever reason, that's fine, but we just can't wait till the last minute, like in November, to get them involved in this. And
could they have a liaison? Could they have a liaison? Could they have a liaison who doesn't vote?
I'm going to talk to them again about it. I mean, I understand reasons why they didn't want to be on this, but again, I'll talk to them again about it. I think that Woody's involvement when we were in the working group was indispensable. And he also had a lot of the time to do a lot of the research, of other town bylaws and stuff. And that's what a lot of this too involves, is looking around at other towns, reading other people's stuff, because
now wait a minute. Former colleagues. I have a lot of former colleagues.
You have 2 former colleagues who are not going to be in office after.
Oh, okay. Select board.
I've asked them. Okay.
No.
I mean, I've mentioned it at other things. I can mention it at town meeting that hey, we need 2 people. I don't really care. I just need more people so we can distribute the workload. That's all.
Yeah.
And have a wider cross section as we're going into these really meaty articles. We're going to make some substantive suggestions. I think we should have a better cross section of the community. So.
Okay.
The other things, so there was the things about the survey monkeys, and this is when I wish Justin was able to be here tonight. This is all this young techie stuff. I do think we should send out some polls. I would ask that you all look at those closely, and any suggestions of different polls, different questions, let's resolve that by our May 8th meeting. As far as Judge,
Sure.
you and I have talked about the scope of your services. If we have to deal with the select board on that, we'll get that done.
It's not only the scope of services that have been authorized, but it's also the scope of my time.
No, I know. I know that, and it's my time as well.
Why don't you give me a call sometime on that? Okay.
I'm sorry.
Could you call me on that?
Yes, I can. Yeah.
I mean, one of the reasons I've written things is to try to take, at least share the burden, but it's on me too, trying to run a business. So anyway, we'll do the best we can with all of that. But whatever we need to get in place with the select board, let's get in place after the election, as soon as we can after the election. Any other thoughts about things? So the broad timeline, I guess we're on target for early December town meeting, and
yeah, we're almost ready to go. But I just want to let you know, Cassandra, I emailed you the chart.
Yes,
for the mitigation.
I did just see that come in.
Okay.
Yes. Tom, did you want to discuss that potential funding opportunity?
Oh yeah, why don't you go ahead.
So there is hold on, my foster dog just came in the office. He's gonna, hold on.
I'm supposed to have my granddog visiting any moment for the weekend. The cat is thrilled with the prospect.
He's good, it's quiet. So there is a grant opportunity through the Executive Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs. They are offering, essentially they can have up to $50,000. Some of the things that they are funding are zoning for sustainable housing production, which includes the MBTA communities. Also mitigation of climate change through zoning and other regulations. So I don't know if that's something that you guys want to potentially apply for. The deadline for the proposals is May 26th.
What I would suggest is that you talk to Charlotte and Montana and shoot for that for the environmental and climate change stuff. Because we did talk about that we're going to need help with that, outside help. So that's probably the best for it. Lauren seems to have a good grip on what's the MBTA thing is, at least what they keep coming out with. I don't know that we necessarily need to be slowed down by hiring, getting an outside expert on board. But our chances of getting a grant are usually slim to none. So if I was to shoot for anyone, I'd do the climate stuff, because I think that's where we are going to need some help. And I'd coordinate that with Charlotte and Montana, how that gets put. I hope somebody knows how to write the application for it. I don't. But.
Yeah.
Yeah, so MAPC does offer technical assistance with applying to this grant. So I could also always reach out to them and see if they would be willing to coordinate with us.
Yeah, that would be perfect, I think. We'll keep our fingers crossed that we actually get a grant at some point in this town. The other thing about, I just want to bring up is some studies. I mentioned a couple that I do think we're going to need outside help with. On the parking, I thought that was a quickie, just are our current requirements of how many spaces we require per use up to snuff with the current state of the art. I'd like to think Weston and Sampson could bang that out in 10 minutes. But maybe we solicit what it would cost for that. The other one, when we get to, if to the extent we are going to talk about frontage and setbacks and things of that nature, we need to have somebody be able to analyze what a particular piece of land will look like with our current zoning with 50-foot frontage and what it would look like in the different districts if you had 75, 100, 150, up to 200, you know, for residency. That's going to be more involved. And it can pick, you know, we might have an ongoing project that could show us that, but, you know, that I wouldn't necessarily want to use that one at the moment. But, you know, there's various pieces of land that could be looked at that might even already be developed, but what could have happened had we had our old zoning or, you know, in the 60s or more typical suburban zoning. I don't know if we're ready tonight. I don't think we're ready tonight to commission that, but I want everybody to give some thought to that of where we are going to need outside engineering expertise as we go through all this. I think in the dimensional tables we will. With respect to if we address the issue of house size, the bylaw working group did some work on its own. And we certainly can support the argument that houses on average have gotten bigger since 2000 than since before 2000, but I think it would be best if we are going to go in that direction to confirm that. And then, you know, my proposal is we're changing to FAR rather than two-dimensional zoning. And, you know, how do we calculate the right FAR? You know, and I know there are towns, and the last one I looked at for whatever reason was Brookline, that towns do have FARs for residential zones, and we can certainly go in that direction. It's a question of what's setting the right numbers for an FAR. I think that's going to require outside expertise. But again, if we're looking at a September timeline of having everything ready, we're going to have to commission those things sooner rather than later. I don't know if they have to go out to bid or we can just commission Weston and Sampson. I'd feel comfortable with them doing it all of these different types of studies. But I want everybody to think too about where do you think we will need that kind of outside expertise, because it's not just legal writing. It's if we're going to make proposals for substantial changes in dimensions, we're going to need the data to back it up. So,
yeah, beyond that, when you're dealing with dimensional requirements, whatever they end up being, you're going to need the modeling for that to show people. It can't be a number on a piece of paper, you know, saying it's 15, you know, feet side yard, this, that, the other thing. You need the visual. The visual absolutely has to show it, because otherwise, I think when you make those, if you make any changes, it's going to be dead on arrival because you just have the fear of the unknown. So when you're able to see it visually, we've had that with other bylaws, especially when the village bylaw, there was a whole thing that it was visual. This is what it's going to look like downtown if you put a building here, and that's why the bylaw passed. So I think it's crucial.
You know, and then with all the other boards too, we have to have these policy discussions. If we change frontage and we go back to suburban frontage, we are going to encourage more subdivision development than we've had. Not that we haven't had none since 1969, but we certainly had more before 1969 than we've had since. And if we are now have, you know, pork chop lots with long driveways, we are thinking of departing from the common driveway that allows 8 houses to be served by a common driveway. We're a complete outlier on that. And, you know, so if we go away from these things, I think we have to be in a position to tell the town what will happen if we go away from them and go back to something that we used to follow. You know, again, I'd like to figure out the process if we're going to have to put any of these things out to bid, or if we can just simply, isn't Weston and Sampson like kind of on a retainer for the planning board? Maybe just go to them. They have the expertise to cover all these areas that we think about. But think about other things. I just, you know, as you're thinking about the dimensions, where are we going to need study really to back it all up?
Well, Tom, I'm running short of time
Yeah,
here.
no, this is
Just a bullet list of some of those things, because they all require spending money and they all require direct select board authorization.
Yep.
So it'd be very helpful if you could just, I love bullet lists. So if you could send that to me,
Okay.
but I am going to have to leave. And I notice when I leave, there's no quorum.
Yeah, no, but I'll say by the 8th, everybody take it, your comments on polls, Survey Monkey polls, and then on this outside expertise thing. And by the 8th, we'll have this ready to present to the selectmen. This is what we want to do. This is where we need to spend some money.
Okay.
Good. How about a motion to adjourn?
Yeah.
Second.
Anything else, Judge Cutler? Anything else? Yeah.
No, not at this point.
Contemplating what I'm spewing.
Okay.
All right. I'll second the motion if it hasn't been seconded. All in favor?
Jack Creighton, aye.
Jack Creighton.
David Frog, aye.
All right. Thank you all for your
Thank you all.
time and attention. And I'll see you at town meeting.
Bye-bye.
Good night all.
Good night.